Hello everyone, today we are looking at a game between Mikhail Tal with the white pieces and Vladimir Simagin with the black pieces. This game took place at Caro-Kann Memorial, 1963 in round 4. Game began e4 and we have a Caro-Kann c6. And just a side note, Caro-Kann was used very effectively by Mikhail Botvinnik in the 1961 match to quote unquote solve the mystery of Mikhail Tal. So let's see how he dealt with this opening. D4, D5, knight C3. So far so good. D takes E4, knight takes E4, and now Simagin opts for knight F6 variation. Now, the variation that really gave Tal trouble in his career is the classical variation, which is began with bishop b5, bishop f5, excuse me. These other variations like knight f6, and knight d7, Tal actually had an excellent record against during his career. Maybe I will do a video one of these days going over all of Tal's games against this particular variation. So Simagin chose knight f6. Tal immediately doubled the pawns, and as you can see here, we have a majority for white on the queen side of the board, and we have a majority of pawns for black on the king side of the board, although they are crippled. So somewhere in the back of your mind, you can think of the Berlin Wall, so to speak, as you have a similar pawn structure, albeit with the sides being reversed. So the black would usually have his pawn majority, crippled pawn majority that is, on the queen side, and white would have his majority on the king side. So here it's slightly reversed. Bishop c4 by Tal. Now bishop d6, and now queen h5. Typical Tal threatening a mate in one move, of course, and already positioning his forces around the king. Castles, knight e2, bishop e6, bishop d3. This causes black to compromise his king side defenses. And now queen h4, rook e8, castles, knight d7, bishop f4, bishop e7. Good move by black, holding on to the dark square bishop. Rook fe1. Now knight b6 by Simagin. Rook a d1. Now bishop c4, trading off some pieces. Bishop takes c4, knight takes c4, b3, kicking out the knight, and now knight e3, and c4. Here, Simagin played the move f5, attacking the queen here. Queen moved back to g3, and then bishop b4 was played. Tal offers the exchange of dark square bishops again, and this time Simagin obliges, as he can gain a bit of time now by trading and then moving his queen with tempi to attack the rook on d2. Rook e d1, supporting the d pawn. And now let me point out that although black has gained a tempo by exchanging out the bishop and moving the queen to a5, that also with the move f5, that he's created more weakness as a result of the move f5 and the exchange of the bishops around his queen. The dark squares are really drafty around the black king at this point. So here, although black does need to keep an eye on this king, of course, around the dark squares. What I want you to focus on right now is the pawn majority of Tal on the queen side. Philidor once said a long time ago, uh, when asked how to win, that basically the method was to create pawn majorities and then from there create a passed pawn and then promote the pawn, right? If chess were only so easy, but those were the 3 steps that he basically gave in this position. So let's see how Tal does it here. B5. Okay, so of course Simagin is threatening to win a pawn here, and also just try to cripple the pawn majority in general. So the strategy is right. We're not really concerned about the tactical part at this point, but the overall strategy to cripple the pawn majority is right. Tal plays d5, keeping his pawns mobile. B takes c4, and at this point, Tal played fantastic move. D takes c6 here. Of course, if he just simply captured B takes c4, then black has an excellent position and is practically winning the game here. So no doubt, Simagin considered this continuation and probably simply felt that he would have enough time to just simply round up this passed pawn. Rook ac8. Now rook d5, attacking the queen, and queen c7. So now there's an option to trade queens, and you have a double attack on this pawn here. Knight d4 by Tal, and now the pawn is a little problematic at this point because it cannot be easily rounded up. So now what? So queen comes to e7, threatening mate on e1, and simply h4. Notice how Tal, like Lasker in his heyday, combines attack along with defense. All right, I remember reading from Lasker that he always tried to make a defensive move combined with attack. If he had to play defense, if he had to ward off a threat, he always tried to add a threat of his own, right? Not just make a purely defensive move, but a defensive move with a little poison in it. So here you can see that the king has loft now. King can get away, but then there's also ideas later on of opening up the king's wing with that move. So that's a little jewel to add to your chess arsenal. Look for moves that combine attack and defense together. So now queen b4, queen g5. Black decides that he's going to make a pass pawn himself. Rook d7, c2. So here is the moment of truth. So what do you do here? Okay, if you want, you can pause the video and try to figure it out. But as you can see, black is threatening to capture the rook and queen. All right, do you play rook c1 here? Okay, let's look at rook c1. The natural move. Okay, now it breaks the coordination of the white pieces. All right, on the d file. But the idea after rook c1 for black is to play a move like rook e1 check, and of course if rook takes, then queen takes e1 winning. So the only acceptable move here would be a move like king h2, and then perhaps rook takes c1, queen takes c1, and then black play a move like queen c5. All right, and he's still in the game here. So Tal, being the monster chess player that he is, played knight takes c2, just simply sacrificing the knight. I know some of you guys were probably focusing on this move right here also, knight takes f5, but the problem with that is you can't give up the rook with check. Okay, so that's a rookie move right there. Tal played knight takes c2, just simply giving up the knight. Knight takes c2, c7, rook e1 check, rook takes, queen takes, and king h2. And you can see there's two major issues in black's position. One is the weakened king side. Two, the passed pawn on the 7th rank. This is what gives white more than enough compensation for his lost piece. Knight d4, queen f6, and now, of course, mate is being threatened after queen takes f7. Black throws in that old spite check, but it's not really a spite check. It's more of a last-ditch effort in the position. And, of course, Tal avoids the trap here by playing king g3. How many of you guys would have just snatched the knight here? Problem is, if you're greedy, then you end up in a perpetual check. Okay, after queen takes f2, there's no way for the king to escape the checks. And then you're upset and telling your coach, friends, and family members how you almost won the game. So after knight f3, just simply king g3, avoiding the check and avoiding any further complications, and Simagin was forced to resign. Okay, so that is it for the game from today. What can we learn from this game? What have we learned from this game in concluding? Well, one, of course, is don't get greedy, because, of course, as you can see, if you grab this knight at the end, it leads to perpetual. So that's one lesson right off the back, is don't get greedy and don't get complacent, right? Analyze to the end. What else can we take from this game? Pawn majorities, very important in chess. Always consider, the ramifications of pawn majorities when you play, especially, say, if you're black or white. Any type of move which allows your opponent to have a majority, as you see here. Knight f6 is an important variation in the Sicilian, but understand it immediately gives white a 4-3 majority on the queen side. So understand those ramifications, right? It's playable, but just understand what you're getting into. The third point that I want to bring up is notice that Tal had played h4 again, feinting the attack on the king side, right? Giving something black to think about and providing luft for his king. So that's the defensive offensive combination that I was talking about earlier, right? If you do have to make a defensive move, always look for a defensive move that has a little poison in it, if you can find it. All right, just don't go purely defensive minded. If you can find a defensive move that has a little edge to it, a little poison to it, then consider that move greatly. And you can see that here with h4. Yes, he allows luft for the king, but he also has the idea later on of playing h5. Okay, he didn't just play h3 as many have played, but he looked for the attacking side of his defense. All right. The final point that I want to mention is how Tal created two dilemmas, right? Or he created a dilemma in the position for black. One was, how do I deal with this passed pawn, right, which was on the 7th rank. Two was, how do I deal with the attack here, okay, on the king side. All right, so that's very important. It's creating a dilemma in the position where your opponent is simply stuck between a rock and a hard place. Right, the principle of two weaknesses. He could not parry both threats at the same time. I said that was the final point, but there is actually another point, and that is the fact that black, right, was I'm not going to say duped, but at some point he got rid of his dark square bishop, which in turn left his dark squares vulnerable. Again, this came to haunt him in the end. If black had a dark square bishop on g7, then he would be just fine. Okay, but or he would be better off at least. I'm not I can't tell if this would work or not, but yeah, there will be no way for the queen to penetrate into the dark squares. So that's another consideration in the game that has to be taken seriously. And as you see early in the game here, black avoided the trade of dark square bishops. But later on, Tal was persistent, offered the trade of dark square bishops again, and it was in the worst situation because at this point, black had further compromised his dark squares on the king side here. And now after this trade, white was able to exploit the weakness of the dark squares later on in the game. So if you put all of those little small details together, you get the winning position at the end for black there. So I hope you enjoyed that game. Please check my links below. Please donate to my channel, like, subscribe, and comment. And also check the links below. There's always going to be DVDs and or books connected to whatever opening that happened to appear on the board today. In this case, Caro-Kann, Knight F6 variation. I'll see you guys on the next video.